So what changed? Oh, first off, who came up with the term Renaissance?
Renaissance?
Renaissance, very good. Yeah, Kirchhoff. Rutgard. We right? We right? Good? Okay, good. And, oh, what happened? What happened to the temperature right when the crusade was beginning? Temperature dropped a little bit. I believe I showed you, yeah, that little bit of a drop.
Yeah, you showed us like the medieval watch period and the little light thing.
A little different today. And so Italian city-states, this idea of rebirth, and don't forget, there's no like set Renaissance. You happy now?
Yeah, you have to say it like that for this whole day.
But if you take it to a laboratory, you will find out that. And then someday, some of you might go to university if you don't go to hospital first. I'll do all the British things. They don't say the. It's university.
And the maths.
Huh?
Maths.
Maths.
Maths. Maths.
Maths. Oh, maths. Yes, yes. Okay, so let's get to the Italian city-states really quickly. Did we get the papal states, independent city-states?
Yeah, I think we got
Straight up.
We didn't get
So-
this part right here.
The merchant class, their power went up as trade increased. Their power went up and the nobility went down. Their power went down. Yes, there would still be a duke sometimes, and sometimes a royal family would come back. But in the 1100s to about 1600s, you're going to see emergence of a new wealthy class. You see a similar thing happen in Europe in the 19th century. You see a similar thing in Asia, like parts of Asia in the 1970s, and like Korea. And most of these countries would become in some way a republic. We haven't had a republic for a very long time. That's government by whom? Representatives. And there are representatives by the few very wealthy merchant elites. Maybe some of the nobility, but they were oligarchies, ruled by a few, chosen by themselves. A republic does not have to be anything at all like a democracy. It's just governed by representation. The United States is kind of a democracy or democratic republic. There are some holes in voting. Some of you might know there's no right to vote in the United States. That's what we call a hole. But so we have a republic, but these are chosen by just a tiny few. So you can imagine they set up this state to not only benefit themselves, but also it really was to brag about their city. Look at us, look at these towers we made. That's probably the reason why they needed the law. That's why I like about that video saying, if we're gonna have the cities in trade, we need law that everybody understands. Not law that we just kind of make up on the fly by dunking someone in a big pool of water and deciding whether or not they're a witch. Which you're going to do, and we're to dunk you, right? Is that the plan? And if you sink, you're not a witch.
Not a witch if I floated.
If you float, you're a witch, and then you have to be, if you sink, but at least you're not a witch. So with that, so these are the most powerful city-states. We've already mentioned the papal states, but Milan and the Duchy of Milan. And at this moment, as we sit here in our seats, and I stand here watching you sit, my nephew is in Milan right now. I have one nephew. Normally they live right here in a little college town, but now they're in Milan. That's where his mom's from. There's my story here. I have another nephew who's in Berlin right now, sitting, just got out of his equivalent of 8th grade classroom. Do you have any other nephews? Oh, and I have another nephew that literally just arrived in Sevilla, Spain for a semester in Spain.
You have lots of nephews.
And then,
That's still a lot.
huh?
Don't they have to take that one test?
It's coming, yeah. The exam, yeah, it's coming.
Is
That basically decides your entire life. Yeah, they do it in 8th grade. And you can get beyond it, but whether or not you're going to be on a track for a trade or track for university.
I mean, that's great.
He's smart, but he's also kind of, he's 13. Imagine having to decide your entire life when you're 13. So Florence, right here, wonderful city. I mean, there are others like Siena was there, but Siena would eventually be rolled into it. this area of Tuscany. Venice, we mentioned before. So this would be Venetia, but it was the city of Venice, and there'd be a couple spots. And then, of course, the Kingdom of Naples. And Naples, sometimes you see it called the Kingdom of Two Sicilies, which I know doesn't make sense because I think Sicily is an island. This is not an island. But just go with me on that. Kind of came out of the Normans. And because of different migration patterns, it's really noticeable. Like you cross a line and it's just different. A little different architecture. People are just a little different. And you go up here and there's a bunch of redheads and go down here and no, it's just different. And you can see the location right here. It is right in the center of all these trade routes in the Mediterranean. And so that's why they grew. It's all location, followed by location. And then let's add one more little tiny thing, location. Trade in this era was dominated by the Mediterranean Sea. By the way, why? Not only because of where trade was coming from, but also the Mediterranean Sea was relatively protected. And so ships on the Mediterranean Sea, you could have those big rollable galleys with relatively flat bottoms. You can take those on the Atlantic, but the harsh storms in the Atlantic, or even worse, the North Atlantic or North Sea, and those things are capsized really easily. One of the big things that will shift is when they start going to sailing vessels. More modern sailing vessels where you don't need the rowers, they can have a deeper keel and therefore be more stable, and you see trade going to the Atlantic. Here, not quite yet. So we got location. Why? The Europeans want all of these products from Asia. Silk. Silk robes was like the symbol of wealth. Perfume was another big deal. Now they did bathe, but still not, no, they were not all filthy. But through Africa, ivory, textiles from India, gold and copper. The big source of gold and copper was down here and then down here. And I should add one more thing, and I don't know why I didn't put this down. Slaves. This was part of the slave trading, as I mentioned before. And don't forget, slaves coming up here into Italy and going around. So with that, we're not going to go through the details of the state politics. I'm going to skip this for time reasons, but let's get to Florence. Florence was this Republican oligarchy. And part of the reason they built this magnificent cathedral, which we'll see more in, after, it's unbelievable, would be to show the greatness of Florence. Look how wonderful we are. And that is a pretty cool skyline. It's kind of unreal. And we're going to see a little bit later on something called the Baptistry. It's right about there. The cathedral, a couple other towers. Everybody wanted to make a tower. Look at what we've done. And a few more things about Florence. Relatively short-lived, but a magnificent country. This would be a center of merchants and banking. Why? And one of the things they would do is set up what we would call today a corporate state, where every wealthy merchant would actually be forced to loan money to the city. But they get in return a piece of paper saying, I'm a part owner of the city. So it's like a corporation where people invest into a company and get a piece of that company called a share or a stock. Here, they would take a forced loan. By the way, what's another word for this?
Taxes.
Taxes. These are taxes. You're going to pay for this magnificent city, but you have to do it. But you get a benefit from it. Just as we pay taxes and we get, okay, not always, and it can be unequal, but pretty amazing benefits. If you don't believe me, try to get any place you want to go without a road and tell me about the benefits you get from this, or the thing you're sitting in right now. It is a desk. Somebody should have taught you how to dance. Taught me. I mean, I know. So they made everybody become a membership. And by the way, are they ever going to get their money back? No, that's not the point. point. But also, this is, we're all in it for the common good. But let's be clear about it. Since it's only a rule by a few, but more people have to pay, yes, it's for the common good, but it's really going to help them. It's really going to help them. You will see this in any oligarchy. They might kind of help everybody because they want to keep the state going, but they're really going to make sure money flows to the top.
For the common good of the oligarchy.
So what we have is a very established social class. And so what we have are the old nobility, the grandi. Okay, I can't speak Italian, we don't have Alex here, but one of the things about it is, I was told this, and I was told this in Italy. If you want to take something in Italian, you just kind of pronounce it and add like a grandi. Can add an emphasis, a flourish at the end, and then they'll respect you. And it worked for me. I go there and I'm just widely respected. And then, but the Popolo Grosso.
Interesting names they have.
But that means, another term you'd see like in France, the nouveau rich. Basically, I mean, these are people, the new merchant class. And then we have guild members are like skilled laborers, professionals, that's this middle. And then the Popolo Minuto, yeah, Minuto. Everyone try Minuto. See, we're going to so impress Alex when he gets back. Looking for you. No,
That is
doesn't feel good. But a pretty, this class structure, but who's in the oligarchy? The grandi and the Popolo Grosso. Here, our people are benefiting from it, making money, so they benefit from the rules they make. The laborers. Which class is the biggest? Yeah, it's the old rich. I mean, no, it's always the bottom of the big. And they're the ones who don't have the vote. Can anyone guess why they don't have the vote to pick leaders? Huh? Yeah, they might actually pass laws that help them. You'll always see this in any movement where they have a republic, where they start electing their officials. There's always going to be a movement by the people on top to try to restrict voting, so they can keep what they have. That's why in the United States of America, there's no right to vote. That wasn't accidental. We saw it here in Florence. So there would be examples over those in the bottom would fight back. At the Chianti revolt, this would be a fight back revolt of the poor against the very wealthy. And how would these be put down?
Gently.
Yeah, gently. But remember we had these with the, there were movements at this time after the plague. There were peasant rebellions in Britain, in France, and the Hussite rebellion in Bohemia. You know, workers started to demand higher wages and they started to crack down on them. I mean, you'll see elements of that here. Workers are demanding higher wages as we are still in a pandemic, even though we might be at the end of it. Here's a picture then of the glorious city of Florence. By the way, at the end of World War II, when the Germans retreated out of Florence, retreated northwards at the end of 44, the orders came from Hitler to burn the entire town. And the commanding general just ignored the order. Same thing happened in Paris. They were ordered to burn it down. And I can't even imagine what would have been lost, but it's pretty terrifying. And here's the Medici family. And these are what we call despots. Who are despots? Leaders. This is an old Greek term. And Cosimo de' Medici right there would be probably one of the leaders of this, one of the leaders of the first oligarchy. And what made him wealthy was a combination of jumping right in, see, you check the date, right after the plague. And they took advantage of this vacuum of wealth and the fact that a lot of nobility or other people have died or lost their land or took advantage of this, speculated and got gold. And they would create by the 14th century or the 1400s a bank that would become the most important in Europe. How would the Spanish end their Medici Bank, though? What would the Spanish discover in the New World that would undermine the entire financial system of Europe?
Gold.
More gold and silver than they've ever seen. And that undermined everything. There were 4 de Medici popes and 1 Queen of the Holy Roman Empire that were de Medici. Oh, and France, too. Almost forgot. Almost all the amazing art and architecture of Florence, endowments, or they were patrons, the artists were patrons of the Medicis. And we'll come back to Machiavelli. Machiavelli would write one of the great works of worldwide prose about what it means to be a king, as he tried to flatter the de Medicis. So, for example, here's Leo X, one of the more corrupt popes, a de Medici. Yes, we'll spend about 20 minutes looking at creepy heads of infants. That's a fun day. And the last thing for today, humanism. Why? Humanism is this idea of going back to the Greek and Roman classics, basically centered on thinking, of learning, which we just saw. Understanding or belief comes from understanding. And centered on this idea of a thinking man. And the big thing is, I think you probably guessed, this is going to have a real threat with Christianity. Except with Christianity. Get this? Okay, you should get that. Because if it's centered on a thinking man, is that no longer centered on Christian dogma? So human-centered. And the 20th century, you see kind of development humanism, will say things like secular humanism, which is kind of a bastardization of this being outside of Christianity, even though Christianity would eventually kind of adopt this too. And it's going to go back to older norms and values. Now, how do we know the way society run? How do we know what older norms and values were? It's an element of, we're going to go back to what we think the Romans did. We think the Greeks did. And so there's an element of soon to be called both liberal and conservative thinking in this. It's an interesting idea. And Capella, they will break it up in this studia humanitas. I can't even say this. Humanitas. You want to try it? I can't do the Latin. What it means are the humanities, the 7 humanities. That comes from Capella. And the study of these humanities, the idea of this, remember you say those 7 liberal arts. You don't need to know all the liberal arts, just big thing liberal arts. I wanted to put that down. Grammar, rhetoric, poetry, history, politics, and moral philosophy. But think about the liberal arts. We'll study these and the idea of human man thinking. And this is where this big change of Petrarch, but paintings of Socrates, for example. So they go back to these classical paintings, away from only the disciples. And this would be the rebirth that would have the most influence. Because once you start thinking you're man-centered, then why not be man-centered in what you do? And wouldn't it be great if you're centering on yourself to have a lot of wealth? Boy, then your life would be easier, wouldn't it? So this would be justifying vast influence of wealth. Last thing, are you ready? Oh, there's Bruni. Bruni is kind of the originator of this thinking, but there's one person we have to get before we get after Bruni. Are you ready? Petrarch. And by the way, I can't describe what it looks like, but does anyone ever, every time I see that picture, anyone ever see this mountain valley and wonder how does that affect humanism? Ever seen the old Archie comics? You know what I'm talking about when I say Archie? Yeah. And you know who Jughead is? I think of Jughead every time I see that. If you don't know who Jughead is, you're going to have to look up Jughead. But he was a scholar, poet, humanist, obsessed with a woman who, to the point of creepiness, but he's considered the father of humanism. Widely read, and what he basically said is, if God gave us all this brilliance, shouldn't we use it? Shouldn't we use it to learn and discover and everything from how the earth functions to invention, to products, to painting, to maps, to exploration, to pizza? We are in Italy. Was there pizza at this time? Kind of. There was stuff on a crust they would eat.
White sauce.
Huh?
White sauce.
And maybe, or not even sauce.
Cheese.
A little bit, maybe. Or it could just be some kind of vague meat. We're not to the first real pizza. Okay, and that's what we're quitting, right? The father of humanism. All right, so on their test, there's going to be 42 short IDs, 17,000 dioramas.
So wait, are you wanting us to do a diorama of every single person that went on the Crusades or something?
I think that's fair. Brennan did it at lunch. Yeah. I stored it in Mr. LaRue's class. Okay, so does everyone have their review list? Let's go take a look at that list. I think everyone has it. If you don't, let me get a couple of them. And what did I tell you? I actually put down the Reformation.
Yeah.
What did that really mean?
The Renaissance.
The Renaissance. You don't have it? Okay. You know how to download that one? Wait, why didn't you have one? I gave you guys one. Wow. I think I might have 2 more, but that's it. We start making less copies. So are there any questions on this? The ones with asterisks are your choices for short IDs. You have one different on. Any questions? And you notice I put a few earlier things on, but the first short ID won't happen until basically the thing about the Crusades. Anyone you're not sure about? Constantinople, I'm referring to the fall of Constantinople. And St. Augustine, that's the whole thing about, we're going to run away to the countryside. Changes in thinking, that's that whole thing about before in the Middle Ages, it was understanding comes from belief. That would shift to belief comes from understanding, meaning I will find out the truth. And thus this, you can see where the beginnings of the scientific method. Big shift. Which, at least my way of thinking, I understand. I'm sorry, belief comes from understanding for me personally, because I know people go the other way around.
That's
It's not school.
Huh?
yes.
Any questions? I'll be glad to answer any question you have on this, anything you're not sure about. What's the vernacular? Yeah.
So you said that the one Constantinople is the attack of it. What about the other Constantinople?
Do I have 2 on here?
Yeah, it's like in the first row at the bottom.
Constantinople on this one is just that's the capital be established of the Byzantine Empire.
Okay.
Yeah,
The Byzantine Empire.
And then you have a second Constantinople.
And that's the one about the fall of Constantinople. I guess I should have put that down. Good question. Put +1 on your review sheet.
Okay.
Nothing will come out of that. But at least have the honor of putting +1.
It's right
Yes.
there.
John Hoots, that was the man who tried to idea of reforming the Catholic Church to make it more connected to the Scripture, and they would revolt in Bohemia and be put down. But kind of the beginnings, you see the beginnings of the Reformation coming. Yes.
The manorial system?
The manorial system, that's the agricultural system that would be centered around the manor, and the peasants would be bound to the land. They'd be relatively self-sufficient. And at the same time, where the big technological changes, like the better plow, but the big one I put down is crop rotation. By the way, I have trade and Medici right next to each other. It doesn't look like I can't help it. I see like that exclamation point for whatever reason I put that there. And then the I at the end of Medici family. Kind of leads you to, they both have an I, they both have an exclamation point. Kind of an optical illusion.
So,
That maybe only I see.
so
Any
are you
other?
just screaming trade?
Yes.
What's the papacy?
The Avalon papacy, that's where, that's also called the Babylonian captivity.
Oh.
And that's where the Pope was moved to France to kind of control. I mean, you're eventually going to have two popes. And then eventually there's going to be one pope in Rome and one pope in Avignon. For a few years, there's three popes. And they finally would agree to settle and just go one pope in Rome again. But that really hurt and kind of indebted on the church. They might have to start selling past the heaven. Yes.
Can you do, I was going, can you do a little Greek something for Black Death too?
Can I do what?
Like a Greek something for Black Death.
The big thing about the Black Death, and that's
How much did they get?
about 1346, 1347,
How much did they
hit Europe almost certainly from the plains of Central Asia, brought by trade, and it was carried through black rafts.
Yeah.
And the big thing about the plague was both pneumonic and bubonic plague, but it spread throughout Europe and would eventually kill maybe up to 50% of the population. Thus destabilizing the old states, ending the kind of good, the relative good times of the when temperatures warmed up and more food production. And it will lead to a number of things like higher wages for workers, nobility lost power. Josh, I have first.
The Hagia Sophia.
That's the amazing cathedral, the church in Byzantium. Any other? Yes.
How many short IDs are we doing?
How many do you want?
One.
One plus 3 is 4. Let's go with 4.
Who's that 3?
The square root of 2.
0 to 2.
Let's go to 7.
Math is made up, so let's go with
Math
is made Let's go base 6. Square root of 2, that means 12.
What about 1 plus 1?
Yes.
Jews during play.
Huh?
Jews during play.
Oh, who was blamed in many places? There'd be Jews and there'd be pogroms who were killing the Jews. Any other questions? Anything else? Any other questions on this list? Don't forget the Renaissance, Toledo.
Or as you like.
Everyone got the Aristotelian logic? Do they come up with a logical path to answer questions? And that would radically change Christian thought. Wow. Where's the place in France where they would really have the big change in thinking, kind of start questioning even elements of the church? That's a great cathedral where they had not just religious characteristics, but also like the 7 liberal arts. Where was that cathedral? Chartres. Chartres. That's where I had the delicious hot dog. But, oh, that's amazing. It's our specialty here. And it was literally like an Oscar Mayer.
Oscar Mayer.
And the thing was, I was so hungry, I didn't even, I thought about sending it back. But then I thought, no, they got it done to us. Which I was, honestly. Not like Italy, where they all respect and honor and praise me.
Maybe because you're not speaking the way that French people are speaking.
I tried. My wife did all this.
Maybe what you need to do is just walk around with like.
Anything else?
I think what you should have done is walk around with a bottle of wine and a baguette. You know, hopefully be good.
That'd be very French. With you need cheese too. They all cheese too. Fromage. Any other questions? So 4 short IDs, and I think 36 matching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it just going to be matching and short IDs?
Yeah, matching and short IDs.
Okay.
And I think 3 groups of 12, and then 4
Yeah.
short IDs.
All right.
No questions? We're good?
I think
And I'm just going to give you basically this list for the short, ones with asterisks, and you choose 4. Then we gotta do one special topics today.
Yeah. I was looking at my notes from the presentations.
Do you want to hear my Rome story real quick about food?
Yes.
You want to hear it or do you want to study?
We want to
Who wants to hear my story? Who wants to study?
Okay, let's take the quiz.
All right, here we go. I'll tell you my story real quick. So we're in Rome, and this guy we were seeing at, he rented a bunch of houses, and he said, this is a great place to eat. It's like a bunch of little grandmas come and feed you. There's like a little hole in the wall. We're like, oh, we gotta go. So my wife and I went there, and it was literally a bunch of looked like a bunch of grandmas. It was awesome. And they brought big mounds of pasta. I mean, it was so good. And when we were there that time, mad cow disease was ravaging Europe. And nobody was eating beef. You didn't want to eat beef because of mad cow. By the way, how does mad cow spread?
How you count?
Yeah, they feed the cows the brains and other parts. They didn't want humans to eat, they feed the cows.
To like liquidize the brains. It's not good.
Let's not go there. But you don't want to get mad cow disease. If you're not sure if it's called mad cow, avoid it. So they had some kind of beef dinner, but they had this big pasta dish, and both my wife and I ordered that because it just looked awesome. And so, just like a caricature, but of an Italian little grandma. And she goes, when I ordered that, like this, and walked away. And so we just kind of laughed. He must have thought it was funny. And brought bread, with big amounts of bread and stuff, and came back with these huge plates. And one was with pasta, he gave my wife, and the other was the beef dish. And it was I'm not kidding, it was like this high. And she sat down and she goes, "You big man, man eat beef," and walked away. So that was how the only time I ate beef there was for mad cow disease and the little grandma. It was, I would say 3 pounds of food. Because I was a big guy. So that was my food tour. And then she brought us, and then we got done, and we didn't even order it. She brought us a cake and cookies and something else. We didn't even order it. See, like I said, how am I treated in Rome?
With respect.
Huh?
Respect.
Respect.
Like a big man.
Like a big man. I mean, 2 other times we had meals and our rooms paid for by people.
You might be good
It's just so good luck.
Yeah. Big boy.
That's actually true. Maybe I'll tell you those stories later on.
Where little man?
No questions? If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to put it on Teams for me to ignore.
Okay, let's do it. I thought that was so funny. That was the funniest thing ever. That would hurt.
Big man.
Where did I hang up?
Look, if I was to talk to